Welcome back to, what are we calling these? The COVID diaries, I guess. We're starting to define our terms a little bit here. What we're doing until we can get back to what this channel was intended, which is interviewing you and the decks that you are playing in Commander. We're taking a look at my decks and some of those that could be upgraded. I mentioned before, all of these are living decks. All of these are decks that I play. So I think it's important, instead of just taking them and putting them away when just dragging them out for an occasional play, I think it's important to rotate them, to keep them as new and fresh as possible. And with the new sets coming out every week the way they are, it's important to be able to upgrade those. And we're going to take a look at Lord Windgrace. Yeah, we're going to take a look at that, and later on we'll talk about what the next one's going to be, and this is going to be the final pre-constructed deck that I'm going to take a look at, the upgrades I made for a little while. I'm going to choose some decks that are more unique, and so those will be upcoming, and we'll talk about that at the end, and we'll talk about why it breaks my heart to do the next one that we're going to make changes to. But that's for later on. For right now, the idea here is I'm looking for your suggestions as far as what cards should be swapped out. I'm going to tell you the ones that I put in. I'm going to take everything out, or rather, I'm not going to discuss all the cards that initially came in the deck as it was built. So I just want to talk about the ones that I've put in. And maybe you'll think of a reason why those cards shouldn't be in there, or have better suggestions. Why don't I just do this and just instead go to EDH Rec and type in Lord Windgrace and just see what they suggest? Because even though we're dealing with COVID, I want to deal with the community. I want to hear what your suggestions are. I don't want to necessarily just go here and see what the cards are that everybody else is putting in. I'm looking for more unique situations and solutions. I'm also looking for trying to keep it budget, trying to make those solutions under $1 or less if possible. But if there's a card that absolutely needs to go in there, for example, put my glasses on. Yeah, Ancient Green Warden, that's definitely going in there. I don't know what that is. It's probably under $1. It seems like every card that comes out that isn't a unique masterpiece, secret lair, kind of ultra classic, card is probably not worth anything these days. I don't know if you're buying boxes the way I used to. And just putting them away and setting on them, but the value pretty much in the toilet these days. So as far as booster boxers go, at any rate, what was my point? My point was looking at the new cards that I want to put in here. I'm looking for your suggestions to make it a community project, and I'm looking for those selections to be unique and something other than everybody else is putting in here. Obviously things are going to overlap and stuff. Anyhow, I'm derailing myself. Let's get into the cards that I swapped out, and some of the reasons maybe why I put them in there. At this point, the Stone Shaker Shaman probably doesn't need an introduction, and it's probably one of the last times I'm going to mention it because it goes into every deck. And it's kind of my mind your own business play. The idea that people don't want to deal with having to waste removal on him because he's only a 1/1 creature, and surely I'm going to bring something else out, means that I got a lot of advantage in the fact that people aren't going to cast spells on my turn because they don't want to lose their land and leave the land open. Probably enough about that. There's some obvious ones like Sneak Attack, though it doesn't necessarily go with the synergy of Lord Windgrace doing the land drops or the landfall triggers. The idea that I can get a creature out quickly Just one of the reasons why I thought I'd keep it in there. Another more unique one that I've got in here is the Allosaurus Rider. You can remove 2 green cards from your hand rather than cast it, or rather than paying the cost to cast it. And its power and toughness is equal to 1 plus the number of lands that you control. With Lord Windgrace and the new landfall triggers being the theme in this latest set, you can see why that would be in there. Another one of my favorites, of course, is the Incarnations and Brawn Trample. And as long as Brawn is in your graveyard and you have a forest, all your creatures have Trample. There's a lot of triggers that I can get off. There's a lot of creatures suddenly hitting the board, say with Sneak Attack or whatever. The fact that they suddenly have Trample brings a whole new level of threat. Loaming Shaman obviously was an include for this to be able to get things back out of the graveyard. There's a lot of synergies that let me get lands back out of the graveyard, but being able to get other cards out of the graveyard obviously is a bonus. Dead Reckoning, being able to put a creature back from my graveyard on top of my library. Obviously, the creatures that I do have in here serve a purpose, and so when they get removed, obviously you want to be able to bring them back. Talisman of Resistance, just for more mana. Solemn Simulacrum, obviously one of those cards that you maybe wanted to get back with the Dread Reckoning or with a Loaming Shaman, because obviously more uses you can get out of them, the better in a single game. Echoing Decay. Target creature and all other creatures with the same name get a -2/-2. Useful for those token decks, obviously. And Fraying Omnipotence. This is one that's a brave choice to use or a crazy choice to use. Crazy is probably, well, it's my preferred way of playing. I literally have the chaos symbol tattooed on my arm, so I'm a fan. Pulse of Madrasa. Return target creature or land card and gain 6 life. Obviously a simple inclusion. Wild Ricochet for keeping those cards that are targeted at you, since I don't have control as far as being able to counter things. The fact that I can redirect them, obviously a nice little surprise. So Spectral Searchlight was one of the newer inclusions that I put in here. Choosing a player, and that player adds 1 mana if any color they choose. Obviously mana fixing for me or for anybody else at the table. Again, you don't want to underestimate the role of politics in the game. And being able to add that to somebody else at that critical time to save you and potentially the rest of the table from a threatening player, obviously a good thing to have. And, wow. Kroserek? I'm sure I'm slaughtering that pronunciation. We'll just call him the Merciless. When an opponent casts a spell, deals damage to target creature or player of the converted mana cost. Doesn't necessarily have synergy with Lord Windgrace, but it absolutely is annoying to everybody at the table. And again, draws some of that targeted removal away from creatures that you maybe need to be a thorn in somebody else's side instead. So that's a quick look at the cards that I put in there. Which of those don't you think are good inclusions? Which ones would be better inclusions, especially with those new landfall triggers? Surely you could think of something else that maybe I should have there instead. So I had said I was going to talk about the next deck that we were going to look at and why it breaks my heart to change that deck. I'm of course referring to my Ghoul Caller Gisa deck, and I realize I think she was an alternate commander for 2014, wasn't she? Regardless, the list that I am going to be reviewing and updating is one that was initially provided to me, or rather I found, from Budget MTG decks. And it represents a turning point in my commander play when I realized that Budget could actually win. And so like I said, it breaks my heart to change that deck, but that deck list will always be there, so I can go back to it if I need to. But I do believe there have been a number of new cards that have been added, a lot of new zombies that could go into that deck and maybe really improve it and make it even more competitive than it already is. That's going to be the next commander that I'm going to take a look at and ask for your suggestions. In the meantime, leave any comments down below. I read everything you write. I do want to thank you for taking the time to watch this, and look forward to hearing great suggestions from you guys.